Hello, people. See, no, it's still not letting me do that. Just wait and see how many people we get on as we go past 2 o'clock. Type something in if you're here, people. Let me know who's here. Hello, Rafi. How are you doing? Who else is here, people? Say hello. Hello, Chloe. I'm all right. I'm starting to get very bored in the house, but never mind. 5 down to 4. Dun, 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 dun. No, that doesn't work either. Hello, Millie. Hello, Ollie. Right, do that. There we go. Fine. Yes, I'm sure. 6. 10. Yes, regular celebrity status. Right. We're still going up in numbers at the moment, so I'll just give it another minute or so, people. 12 now. It'd be nice to get 20 of you again. We'll see. Right, one more minute, and then at 5 past I'm going to start, and hopefully other people join shortly after. Hello, Okay. Right, okay, people. Oh, here we go. It's just my reading face. It's obviously slightly more obvious when I'm looking at the comment box down the side. You turned Dance Mums off, right? I'm honestly not sure I can compete with that. But there we go. It's nice to see that you're doing something deeply, should we call it educational? Right. Okay. So for those of you who are on here, you've got your right. Trying to talk to myself now. You've got your assessment next week. Hopefully the technology is going to work for you. Have you all managed to sign up on the computer-based system that they've put up? That's my first question to you. Is anybody still having problems signing up? You're all good up on that? Good. Anyone having problems, or is it all running tentatively smoothly at the moment? Excellent. Okay. So in terms of the assessment next week, from my side, what should happen, and just to kind of clarify, when the time slot opens, you'll be able to go on to that account, onto the Canvas website. You will then be able to download the Word document with the assessment questions on. That will be a Hamlet extract question. It will be a what else have we got? The Hamlet debate question, and then the three choices for the I'm not telling you the questions now, no. Three choices for the Gatsby question. Has anybody at this stage got questions about the questions other than tell me the questions? Is anybody unsure of the format or anything for the questions at this stage at all? Any questions you want to ask now at this stage? It's a pen, Luke. Slide you some Hamlet critic. Well, remember, with the Hamlet critics, you've got the ones we did the other day. So who's marking it? It's probably going to be me marking them all at the moment. We'll see. Or not for Mel's class at Newcastle. That'll be Mel. I will mark at least part of the Stafford papers, if not all of them. And then obviously my class at Newcastle. You don't use the critics in the extract. So with the extract, you're just analysing the extract. There's no need for critics in that. You only have critics in the second Hamlet question and in the Gatsby question. As I say, with the are we expected to link Gatsby to other American texts? Down the line, you will definitely want to be linking into other American texts. And obviously, your main one of those will be The Grapes of Wrath. We have done a few different wider reading American texts. So, for example, the one we did over this, The Story of an Hour. If you can manage to link those in, please try to. At this stage, I'm still more worried about you using Gatsby and any critics you've got to kind of link into that. So if you can, but I'm not going to have kind of a hissy fit if you don't. Do you have to name, I'll go through the structure in a second. Do you have to name the critics for the Gatsby one? In an ideal world, you will name the critics, but if you remember roughly what the critics said, but you can't remember the whole thing, or their name, still quote it, just say critics have noted, and then kind of the view that's been expressed. You don't have to kind of get in the name. In terms of, and I will come back to the structure one in a minute, answers to the example, answers to the question, remember in the build up to the exam, they are available on iSight. So if you go onto the iSight for English literature and you go down to the bottom of the page, there's a bit called example responses or exemplar responses or something. And if you go on to that, then there's at least 2 or 3 A grade responses for that. No, as I say, at the moment, I can't legitimately expect you to make masses and masses of links to wider text because we've only done a very limited number of those in class. So it would be unfair of me to hammer you down on marks if you don't do that. Yeah, that would be unfair. Yeah, it's an open book response. So it doesn't mean that you'll be expecting an A star. But just remember, so going back to kind of Arabella's question before, with the critics at this stage, because it's an open book one, you can have any little bits of notes next to you. So you could have your kind of critical responses down next to you, and you can just refer to those as you're answering the questions, okay? Any other questions at this stage before we just have a quick go together at doing some questions to see if any other questions pop up kind of in your mind? Any more for any more? Okay, great. So again, at this stage, because we've not done masses and masses of criticism over the course of the year, we've looked at a couple of pieces while we've been in class. We looked at the one the other day. In the final exam, in the final exam, you will probably reference, say, 3 critics, maybe 4 critics in your essays. And obviously you'll be kind of selecting from more than that you've done. Then that'll come into it. But at this stage, again, just try and get in what you can. You won't get an increase in grade if you take a lift with Hector. Your predicted grades for university will not hang on a single assessment. They will only hang on, or they won't even, hang on a single assessment. Your predicted grades will take into account everything that you've done, your coursework. By the time you've done, we put in your predicted grades, you'll have done a couple of assessments next year as well. So don't worry about predicted grades too much at this stage. Just do the best you can in this assessment. You're not going to fail the marks in September. Who's joking about what? I can't work out what you're referring back to. Okay, has everybody got their Hamlets next to them? Have you got Hamlet texts near you? Yeah, you'll be able to see the predicted grades once they go through. You'll be able to discuss your predicted grades with your teachers as well. And yeah, there will be a set of marks kind of when you come back in September, when we can do it properly as well, the exact format of that. I'm uncertain of at this particular stage in time. That's not fair. Why is it not fair, Rofi? You got to think about it, Rofi. We do this one now, and then how many months is it until September? Go on, do maths. How many months then from now until September? Your predicted grades, Arabella, will probably not come through until kind of into September, and they can still be changed about and things right up until your UCAS form is sent off. Because it's open book at this stage, Grace, I would just have next to you, as I say, any references to critics that you've done in your revision. So don't try for this to kind of draw it from your mind. Have them next to you. Basically, I haven't been to Nando's for years, Luke. Not for years and years and years. My Wi-Fi crying. Right, okay. Let's have a look at some kind of questions then, people. And then, if you've got other questions that pop up, then you can kind of ask them, okay? So, in terms of the extract question, in a really kind of sophisticated way, we're going to use Act 3, Scene 3. Oh, I should have written it backwards, shouldn't I? That was very foolish of me, because the camera does it in backwards. Never mind. Right, I want you to go to Act 3, Scene 3, people. Act 3, Scene 3. Open that up in your books. Go to Act 3, Scene 3. It reads fine. Is it just the way that it comes up to me because I'm looking at it from this direction? That works for you guys. You can read that. Dun, dun, dun. Excellent. Not Enter King, Enter Hamlet. The king's there at the very start, yeah. I'm still getting used to this. It's obviously that it just looks to me like it's in a mirror sort of thing. Right, so it's still there then. You can have it that way. Right, has everybody got that one open? Dun, dun, dun. The Roman numbers thing. What on earth are you on about, Rofu? Okay, right. So what I want us to do together, and page 165, if you're in the Heinemann ones, I'm assuming. Mine is page 326 in this one. Obviously, it's the same question every single time, okay? So there's nothing different about it. It's always going to be essentially, how is Shakespeare using language? How is he structuring this bit? What's the kind of overall importance of it? No, Rofi, it should be Act 3, Scene 3. It should be the King with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and then up to the King on his own, Claudius's soliloquy. Right. What I want you to do, people, I want you, and at this point, I'm just going to kind of read back over it myself. It's going to be a thrilling watch for the next 5 minutes. I don't think he literally goes that far, Luke. Let's keep the language slightly cleaner. I want you to go back over it. Imagine that that's an extract. Now, again, the practice here is that you think, why is this extract important? How does this extract kind of, what is it following on from? Where does this fit in the play? What's developed within this extract? And then what kind of features are used to actually develop this, okay? So I was just kind of flicking through earlier on. I've landed on this one because we've looked at a couple of extracts from the end of the play. I wanted to look at one from the start, okay? So I want you to have a look. I want you to read through together in it now, or not together, but whilst you're on this. Make a note of what the key points within this are that you would pick out, and what kind of lines of argument are we going to have here? What's being developed, okay? Yes, I like him not that bit. I like him not, nor stands it safe with us to let his madness range. Therefore prepare you. I your commission will forthwith dispatch, and he to England shall along with you. Right, go on. Quiet time, people. Reread over it. Make your annotations. What are you going to say about this extract? In fact, as you come up with points, you can start typing the points in. But I want sensible points at this point. No, Luke, you're supposed to be. So you're supposed to be looking at this scene. You haven't broken me. For those who've just joined, I wonder if I can prop this up. You should be looking at. No, that's not going to work either. Scene 3, from the very start to enter Hamlet. Dun, dun, dun. And what I want people to start commenting on is just what kind of arguments we would make, what kind of bits of evidence we would pull out from this as part of it. Okay. So you should be rereading over it, and it should draw out any kind of any further questions around this question, hopefully, as you look at it. I'm just reminding myself quickly, and then we'll run through it. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, right. Right, let's just see what you've come up with so far. Yes, there's a selfishness kind of developed around Claudius here. I like him not, nor stands it safe with us. So the very start of the scene, it establishes Claudius's kind of antagonism towards Hamlet with a kind of selfish angle. There's a self-preservation coming into here, and he's aware that Hamlet is kind of challenging him. Yeah, as Ollie says, it kind of identifies Hamlet as an enemy, and this is the first time we see the plot to have him dispatched to England. It doesn't actually kind of indicate, though, at this stage that he's going to have him killed. This is not necessarily part of the plan yet. Which line can't you see, Millie? Which one can't you find? If you want to go to the toilet, you can go to the toilet, Luke. Yes. So again, there's that kind of us and them mentality. He's Hamlet in Claudius's. It's right at the very start, Millie. So at the very start of the scene, it's literally the first line from the King. So at the very start of Act 3, Scene 3. So we've got the us and them mentality. We've got Hamlet here. Yes, there's a sense of urgency that develops. So good Grace, when he kind of later on, when his kind of final words to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern before they exit, arm you, get ready, speedy voyage. There's a sense of urgency here. Yeah, the pronoun I, where he's saying arm you, get ready, essentially. What kind of terminology could we put with that? So we've got I like him not, nor stands it safe with us. We comment on the pronoun choice. We've got arm you, I pray you, to this speedy voyage. What terminology there? If I say to you now, arm you, go and do this, I'm giving you a what? Yes, so we've got the imperative use that suggests that Claudius is kind of pushing for this to happen quickly. He's kind of worried. Where do we get a sense that Hamlet's madness is getting worse, or at least that Claudius believes his madness is getting worse, that creates this urgency? Give me a line that suggests his madness is getting worse. Yes. Now, M points out a really good point here. There's a sense of irony that runs throughout this scene, both in the fact that he's sort of suggesting the sense the whole state of Denmark isn't safe because Hamlet is threatening him. And he's kind of worried about this. Think about that same sense of irony and how that's built up through kind of what Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are saying. They are trying to flatter Claudius, but through that flattery, we get the further level of irony because we know that Claudius has killed the old king. Yeah, good, Arabella. So his soliloquy here reveals a kind of sense of guilt coming through. And we start to see a kind of more human side to Claudius. It reveals that he is not necessarily as certain in his own actions as maybe he initially appears. Yeah, so Claudius hints at this. It's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern who kind of push this idea further, that if the king dies, then so does the kingdom, essentially, that many lives are linked to the life of the king. And so if the king dies, then so does the state suffer. Now, the irony to this is that Claudius has killed the other king, old Hamlet, and so he's potentially, his own sense of guilt would be actually evoked by the words of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, although they aren't intending to make him feel guilty. You do like books. Find me which bits, people. I want some more direct kind of quotations here. So, what bits would we maybe quote from Rosencrantz and Guildenstern? What bits might we bring out from Polonius, or what bits might we bring out from Claudius's soliloquy? Because we can't quote it all. You're not going to have time in half an hour in order to kind of do all of this. So, which bits? I want some more kind of key quotations brought out. So, we've got. Yes. So, hazard so near as just hourly grow out of his brows. So again, you're looking to apply terminology. Hazard so near as doth hourly grow out of his brows. What terminology can we apply to this? Yeah. So I still want terminology to the hazard so near. Yeah. And then we've got my offence is rank. So that kind of characterization of his offence, his sin. Yes, good. So we talk about the metaphor. We've had the pronoun choice. We've talked about metaphor. We've talked about imperative. We've got the characterization of his offence as rank. We could talk about the adjective there. The kind of fear that it stinks, that he's becoming exposed. Yes, good, Arabella. So you're talking about this scene within the context of the play as a whole. So you're seeing this as a kind of turning point at which Claudius is starting to panic. He's starting to lose control. He is starting to doubt his own actions. The brow is just sort of his seat of reason. It doesn't necessarily mean on his kind of eyebrow, literally, just from his head. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, again, so this kind of fear of exposure, this kind of the smell imagery goes in with this kind of fear of exposure that's being drawn out. Yeah, exactly. So good. The kind of, as Ollie points out there, what you've picked up on here is that the critics help you in these extract questions to identify things, but you don't necessarily quote them directly in this. Okay, so the start of Luke's bit there is useful. My crown, mine own ambition. So at this stage, does Claudius want to give up what he's actually taken? So whilst he feels guilty, does he have any intention to give up everything that he's kind of taken at this stage? I haven't got a single document. We just try and build it up. We might try and put together one at some point. That would be sensible. I'm aiming to kind of. I don't want to go any longer than a lesson time. So at most, I'll take it a bit over an hour. That I'll kind of stream for doing this. Yes, so you get that kind of triadic structure. These things that he's gained: my crown, my ambition, my queen. At this stage, he can have all three, but he can't have all three and repent and have his kind of guilt go away? Yes. So good, Chloe. My stronger guilt defeats my strong intent. What's been done to the guilt here? Again, what kind of terminology could we apply here? My stronger guilt defeats my strong intent. He's doing what to his guilt here? Good. So we're personifying the guilt. The guilt is something that's kind of taking over here. His guilt is stopping him from kind of truly repenting. You could also talk about the comparative here, stronger, kind of making his guilt greater. Yes. So his imagery here fits into imagery that Hamlet has introduced elsewhere, of rot and decay. So again, a number of critics have kind of drawn this out. Superlative where, Ophi? There is a superlative in this, but you tell me where. The comparative bit's the stronger guilt. Anyway, so yeah, it fits into that wider kind of imagery of rot and decay that fits into the play. Claudius is kind of realizing here the kind of the sin he's committed on a kind of new scale. I want, before I move on to the next question, people, I would like just 3 more bits of evidence that we would pick out. Pick me out 3 more bits of evidence, then I'll kind of summarize and see if there are any questions about this question. Yeah, good. So in that list, that kind of triadic structure that we talked about before, he places the queen last. So he has here the queen as his kind of almost as a side issue. He's more interested in the crown. So again, it builds up that selfish nature to him. Line 64 to 66. Dun, dun, dun. In mine, that's the what then, what rests, try what repentance can, what can it not, yet what can it? Is that the line you mean, Luke? That's animal cruelty, don't chuck out the window. Just tell me, Luke, which line it is you actually mean, rather than, because the line references are slightly different in different versions. Help angels make a say. Yes. So the appeal to heaven is what he's kind of going for there. That he's kind of appealing to heaven for grace and for mercy, but he realizes that he can't actually get forgiveness. Yeah, good. He's commanding his own knees. He says, bow stubborn knees. He's kind of, it's imperative, but again, it suggests a struggle for him that he wants to repent, but he can't repent. Yeah, there's a kind of irony here. We recognize that he's probably not going to go to heaven. And sorry, going back to Luke's bit there, think about that bit, Luke, with it's a kind of questioning structure. What then? What rest? Try what repentance can. What can it not? There's an uncertainty here, essentially, in Claudius appearing through it. He can try to repent. He can try to do these things, but there's also a recognition that because of the depth of his evil actions, and because he won't give up what he's gained, he can't truly expect repentance, essentially. Right. I'm just going to kind of summarize from what you guys have given me. I'll run through kind of roughly what the answer structure would be given what you've told me. And then I'll just move on to the next question, just a quick kind of discussion around that, okay? So I'm introducing this extract. I would start off by saying that it comes in the middle of the play where Hamlet's kind of escalating madness is creating a kind of increasing uncertainty and insecurity in Claudius. This bit follows on. In fact, I'm going to question you. What's just come before this scene? Was Hamlet just put Claudius through that sent him and really wound it up a notch? What's he just forced him to watch? Yes, the play, The Mousetrap. So I think you just need to say it once. Right, okay. So he's just watched the play. This is kind of serving as then a turning point, at which this insecurity is built up. So these kind of things will go into my introduction, situating the extract and what we can then see there. We then talk about the kind of selfish aspect to Claudius, that wish for self-preservation that comes through it. And we'd have things like the pronoun use, the kind of desire to distance himself from Hamlet, the kind of the imperative use, the speed that's associated with it. I'd probably then have a paragraph about the irony that runs through it, because we are aware of Claudius and his actions beforehand, and the fact that Claudius himself has been the one to disrupt the kingdom of Denmark by killing the king. So we can link into kind of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's dialogue there. I would then look potentially at Claudius's kind of remorse and guilt, but the kind of recognition that he's not going to be able to kind of fully escape from this kind of sense of guilt. Okay. The other bit within that is obviously Polonius. What's about to happen to Polonius? What's going to happen to him even in the following scene? Yes. He dies. So this is actually these lines from Polonius here are the last line that we hear from him. These are his kind of final words here, essentially. They're not terribly interesting final words. They're not terribly profound, but these are his final words. So sadly, that's the kind of the end of it for Claudius. Yeah. Yeah, please don't write that in the exam. Yeah, let's not get quite that confused. Right. So that would essentially, I would probably leave the Polonius point to make my last point in the essay, just as a brief one, just because it kind of links into what follows. And it allows me to kind of situate this extract in relation to kind of what follows on afterwards. Good. I think there is a bit of delay with some of these coming through to me. What I want you to do, in fact, no, quickly first. Yeah, he has everything he thought he wanted, the king, but he realized he's kind of sacrificed his soul along the way. Has anybody got questions about how you would actually go about answering that question at this stage? Or do you think, the principles are there, the approach? Just if you get questions pop up, just stick them up. This is my other Hamlet question, people. So this will be the statement if you want to write it down somewhere. The question is always simply, I can't remember the exact phrasing off the top of my head. Basically, it's how does Shakespeare use language and dramatic technique within this extract? Can you see it? Sorry, cut that off, people. That's my statement that you're going to look at in terms of an argument. So write that down quickly. Can you see it now, people? I've lifted up slightly. I think the closest you'll get to a celebrity is the cat, I'm afraid. You got about 5 more seconds where I'm holding up this thing. Right, okay. So the second question for the Hamlet one will always have a vague link in to the extract. Okay. The cat's upstairs somewhere, and then the other one's outside somewhere at the moment, I'm afraid. So within this one, already from looking at the extract, what kind of argument could we make about Claudius? Does Claudius ever truly repent for his actions? Or is true Claudius's remorse only a kind of selfish remorse? It's not a true remorse. How could we argue Claudius's remorse? The roommate tag. Then that's you've quoted that, but I don't know what that means either. Yes. So it's selfish. So because you've read the extract and the extract is linked in to the kind of question, we can already start to see some lines of argument that you can make, and they will always try and create some vague link one into the other. So you should be thinking here what that link kind of is in between. And with Claudius, yeah, he shows a kind of private remorse. He's never willing to kind of publicize it. It's a kind of selfish remorse that means that he kind of seeks to get everything, and he only is remorseful, yeah, that when he fears discovery. That's the only time that he's remorseful, when he fears discovery, when he fears that his own life is in danger. Then the remorse comes into it. Now, That's already given you for this second question a kind of a starting point. Good. Let's see what else is coming up. Yes. And it's the kind of it's the primal eldest curse. It's the kind of Cain and Abel type of curse. So it links into the kind of biblical tradition. Yes, the stubborn knees linked to it as kind of it being forced. Just remember, if you're trying to look at these things and read back, you can watch this back afterwards, and the comment box will still come up at the same time, so you can kind of go back to a point that you kind of missed. Right. So you've already got Claudius. Let's think about some other characters. Okay. The timings for this one. So when you do the one next week, it will be slightly different to in the final thing, um, or at least for the Gatsby question, it will. You should spend around about 10 minutes planning each question. Next week, you'll only spend about 30 minutes writing each question, approximately. In the actual exam, it'll be around about that time for the two Shakespeare questions, but because you're comparing the two American Lit questions, they will be slightly longer. You'll spend an hour writing that one, but you only got half an hour now because you haven't done the Grapes of Wrath. Right, so you want to think about other characters. We've thought about Claudius, and that's been kind of inspired from the extract. Let's think about our other main characters. Which other characters do bad things and then feel remorse or a lack of remorse afterwards? Give me suggestions. Which would be our other good characters to focus on here in terms of doing a bad action and feeling remorse? Good, Gertrude. Now, we've talked about Claudius with Gertrude and Hamlet. Good. So let's start off with Gertrude. Do you think that Gertrude starts to feel a real sense of remorse after her actions? Do you think that, so say following the closet scene where Hamlet kind of makes her look at the two pictures and kind of challenges her on her behavior, do you see Gertrude starting to show a more genuine thing? Ophelia would be, it depends on your view here. Ophelia would be one that you could maybe deal with some critical views in that. It depends if you view Ophelia kind of allowing herself to be used in the plot against Hamlet, or allowing herself to be watched as she talks to Hamlet, as to whether that is a wrong action or not. Something that I'll give you down the line to read will be A.C. Bradley's his lectures on Hamlet, and he talks about whether Ophelia does bad things or not, essentially. Go back to Gertrude, though, people. I want to know whether you think Gertrude shows true remorse or not. What do you reckon? Yeah, so Luke points out we're still on Ophelia there, though, that he kind of she is kind of tied more to her father than Hamlet. Yeah, Hamlet arguably feels a true sense of remorse later on for the killing of Polonius, for his actions towards Ophelia when he's kind of in conflict with Laertes. Good. So she does feel a kind of remorse. Lego Yoda, I don't know who you actually are, but there we go. So, as Lego Yoda points out, we do feel a kind of that she does feel some remorse. This is where you could build in references to different performances. So, in some of the performances, when Gertrude drinks from the poisoned cup at the end of the play, it can be an act that is meant to protect Hamlet. It can be something that shows a true remorse. So I would say that in the David Tennant version, Gertrude is depicted as knowing what she's doing, knowing it's the poisoned cup, and that would be right. Okay. I will call you Lego Yoda in class if you want, then as well. Yeah, so it could be that that shows a true remorse there. What's Millie puts? Yes, so good. What Millie's got there would remember for this question, for the Hamlet question, it's about different lines of argument. So with Hamlet here, on one level, it could be argued that it's a genuine remorse. On the other hand, you can argue that other people might view his actions here as being more about being in conflict with Laertes, as far more selfish, that he doesn't feel any genuine sense of remorse. He simply wants to kind of challenge Laertes on his grief. Yeah, in the bedroom scene, in the closet scene, she potentially shows a sense of remorse there. Yes, Rofi, I'll call you Rofi in class. Yes, Grace. So you can, the films, remember, the different adaptations are essentially different points of view. So they perform the same kind of idea, they show different kind of lines of argument and different interpretations. They're adaptations. So they're essentially critics. Every director approaches the same text, but they draw something slightly different out of it. That's something I keep meaning to watch at some point. Before watching, I can't tell you for definite, but I will have a look at that and see if we can work that in as an adaptation at some point. But yeah, any of these things count as adaptations. We've touched on Hamlet quickly. Who does Hamlet show absolutely no remorse at all towards killing? Okay. Who does he really not care about having killed? You can call me Stuffer if you want. Um, yeah, in the Tennant version, yeah, it kind of takes her back to a kind of mother type figure at the end. Yes, and Hamlet's lack of remorse. So he feels initially there's maybe no remorse shown for the killing of Polonius. There maybe develops more to a bit of remorse later on, but he definitely shows no remorse about the killing of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Goodwill. And he kind of, remember we talked about it as being quite kind of Machiavellian. He takes on this kind of ends justify the means type aspect to him. Good. Right. So I'm just going to summarize this one because I just want to look at the Gatsby question quickly as well. Right. So if I was answering this one, I've only got half an hour to do this, and I would choose to just pick out three of the central figures. If I was answering on this one, I would use Hamlet, I would use Gertrude, and I would use Claudius. And I would say that in each case, for each of the characters, I would, to start with, say that they maybe show a remorse at some point, but that later on it kind of calls into question through various ways. Yeah, so good. If I was talking about Hamlet, and we would take Em's point here so that she doesn't feel pied, then we could talk about the fact that following on from the death of Polonius, he treats him with a disrespect. He's very dismissive around the death, but we maybe talk about there being a level of remorse later on. And you could then kind of turn that on its head and say that even later on, whether it's a genuine remorse or not is kind of debatable. Polonius or Claudius? What do you mean, Arabella? So for the killing of Polonius or the killing of Claudius, he feels no guilt for or remorse for the killing of Claudius, although he maybe feels some later on for the killing of Polonius, as it's kind of depicted to us. If you're talking about Claudius, you could talk about his kind of seeming remorse, but how it's fake, maybe, and more selfish. And with Gertrude, you could talk about a kind of an emerging remorse for what she's done that's played up more in certain adaptations than others. Okay. So, okay, here we go. Here's a Gatsby one, people. So that's Gatsby. Write it down, write it down, write it down. Write down the Gatsby one. Yeah, Grace, that'd be a good one. It's a nice little critical quote that suggests that Hamlet is acting in a kind of moral way, essentially. Has everyone got that down for the Gatsby question? Give me a yes or no, people. Does anybody need me to hold it back up again? Right. Okay. Good. So we're obviously on to the Gatsby one. So think about this one again. It's very much a kind of debate question. American authors often favour the oppressed. So if you're thinking about Gatsby, think about which groups would be considered the oppressed. And once you've considered which groups appear to be the oppressed, think about whether they're favoured or whether they are kind of looked on in an unfavourable light, whether they're looked on in a kind of unpleasant light. So let's just see what we've got going around this. Yeah, so as Em points out here, in many ways, Myrtle is the oppressed group. She's part of this kind of lower class depiction of kind of not just being working class, but being female as well. And she's focused on, yes, but definitely not favoured. And in fact, Daisy is made far more favourable in many ways than Myrtle is. Neither of them are perfect, but um, Myrtle is certainly not favoured, especially through the narrative voice of Nick. Yeah, so as kind of Lego Yoda points out, it can be that it's not necessarily meant to favour them. It's meant to show a realistic depiction of how they're actually treated at the time. By showing the reality of how they're treated, you could argue that that, in a way, favours them. Yeah. So as it kind of goes on with Luke, it's very difficult to tell whether it's actually because they don't like them, they don't favour them, or whether they're just trying to show something realistic. And yes, her boobs were done dirty though. Yeah, in what way? So if you're going to say you're considering Daisy as oppressed, in what way is she oppressed? Yeah, and again, so as Grace comes back, the Valley of Ashes as a whole, so it shows them suffering in the Valley of Ashes, but does it favour those people in the Valley of Ashes, or does it actually favour the people at the top? Does it favour the rich more than it favours the poor? Yeah. So George is kind of, again, another one of these figures of oppression, but he doesn't really get favoured. He's depicted in a very unflattering light again. He's kind of, you know, through the voice of Myrtle, through various different means, he's kind of smashed down to the bottom. Yeah, that's the best thing a woman can be in the world, a beautiful little fool. So essentially, because she's a woman, she is of the oppressed group at this point. And she is then, again, she's maybe more favoured. Um, at least initially, there's a real romanticism given around her, but you could maybe look at it later on. Yeah, and Myrtle is kind of criticised because she's trying to climb that social ladder. So as you're linking into the context, it becomes kind of more disruptive. Yeah, and Will has again the kind of the beautiful little fool bit. Yeah, so Daisy's oppression comes in a totally different form to those in the Valley of Ashes. So you can kind of say that whilst Daisy's oppressed, she's still kind of looked on in one way. But yeah, she's peng, but her voice is full of money. So the reality of that kind of favouring comes out later. We favour her because she's a symbol of wealth. Um, Yeah, and she's aware. So, do I think she's depicted in a negative way because of that? Um, I don't quite know how to put it. I don't think in a negative way necessarily. I think she's aware of her own oppression, and that lends her a sympathy. Yeah, so the very naming of the characters, Daisy is more favoured in that naming. She's the daisy as opposed to Myrtle, the weed. Yeah, so she potentially sees herself as more oppressed than we see her. Is that what you're kind of pushing towards there? Gatsby takes the blame, yeah. So there's a kind of nobility given to Gatsby. Is Gatsby one of the oppressed, though? In what way is Gatsby oppressed? If we're going to talk about Gatsby as oppressed, how could we talk about that? How would we justify that? Yeah, so an interesting point there. Um, the Wilsons are kind of more unstable because they don't have the financial stability, and that's what's kind of driving them apart. Whereas Tom and Daisy are not oppressed in that same financial way, and are therefore that's actually what keeps them together. Yeah, good. So if you're talking about Daisy, you can talk about her as being on a kind of different level of oppression. She's oppressed as a woman, but not financially. And then, yeah, if you're going to contextualize Gatsby as being oppressed, you would need to talk about him as being oppressed within that kind of world of the new rich as opposed to the old rich. Yeah. And she's conforming towards these standards. Right. Pardon me. I'm just looking at the kind of time on this, and I want to kind of draw it towards a close at this stage, people. So, to kind of summarize around it, if you were responding to that question, you want to keep the question terms in mind, and you want to kind of situate who you are saying is an oppressed group and in what way are oppressed, because there are groups in this novel that are oppressed in different ways. So you get women as kind of oppressed. You get those who are financially oppressed. Um, so situate that kind of oppression, what its source is, and then think about whether Fitzgerald actually presents it in a favourable way or not, whether he looks upon them and presents them in a good way or not. Yeah. So good point again. You're kind of Gatsby's dreams. He's kind of oppressed in the kind of achievement of his dreams because he's of the old rich, uh, new rich even. And then with Daisy, it's easy for her to marry Tom. But again, think about different types of oppression here. You're not Oppression doesn't come always in the same form, so you can talk about different types of oppression as it goes through. Yeah, and again, Gatsby's oppression is far more superficial. It's not the same damaging oppression as for other figures within the narrative. So, as you're answering the question, situate who the oppressed group is, in what way they're being oppressed, or the oppressed individual. Then you move into whether they're favoured or not, or whether it's more ambiguous, whether they're favoured in certain ways for certain reasons, but they're also kind of looked down upon. And you simply write several points with your evidence and hopefully with your critics coming in. Right. Because we're going on towards an hour and 15 at this point, people. Have any of you got further questions about the exam next week that have kind of cropped into your mind at this stage? Yeah, so Daisy and Tom's relationship, yeah, no, it's definitely relevant that it's not just their relationship as individuals, it's also representative of a wider relationship. Yeah, we're done in a minute. I just want to see if there are any more questions specifically about the mock next week, and then I'll just tell you what I'm going to do next week to kind of further help and support. With the Gatsby critics, remember they're on the iSite. There are a load of articles around Gatsby. Any of those can be used as critics, Grace. There's also, and I sent it probably 2 weeks ago now, I think, that link to the kind of journal archives. And again, any articles from on that you find can be used as kind of Gatsby critics. So I'd recommend you use the stuff on the iSite and kind of search on that journal archive for further critics if you want them. As I say, you mentioned earlier that you'd found some on Quizlet and things as well. You can quite happily nick those as well. That's absolutely fine, and work those in. Oh, well, yeah, the questions. Well, question one is no, not doing that. Give us the first line at least of the theme. I'll tell you what I'm going to do next week, okay? Your English Lit mock is on the. Is it Thursday for the English Lit one? Is it Thursday? I'm pretty sure it's Thursday. What I'm going to do next week, early on next week, probably on Monday, I'll try and make it fairly short and sweet. I'm just going to do Wednesday. I can remember it might be Thursday over it. I might be thinking of the language exam maybe then. I know it's sort of later on in the week though. It's not Monday or Tuesday. On Monday, I will do a very short video, or comparatively short. I'm going to try and keep it. It's at 8:30 because there are different subjects at different times in the day. The English language mock is the discursive questions. So you do 2 discursive questions about the social context stuff. So it's going to give you a kind of statement around like language and gender, or language and accent and dialect even, or something like that. And then they would you'd argue different perspectives around that. It should be, okay, don't quote me on this, it should be that how the mock works, the window opens at 8:30. You don't have to start to bang on 8:30, but I would recommend you don't restart it too late, okay? Yeah, accent, dialects, and social groups with a kind of brief stimulus. Discursive just means that you discuss around it. Don't overthink it. It just means that you kind of go, well, on one hand, it could be viewed like this. On the other hand, it might be viewed like this. This theorist would say this thing about it. This theorist would say this thing about it. So don't get too tied up in that. It's just one side of the argument, the other side of the argument, if that makes sense. Lockdown's starting to get tedious, but we're now allowed to drive to places to go for walks, so it's not as bad. What am I doing to keep me sane? Probably drinking more than normal, and then playing more computer games than normal. What else was I going to say? Yeah, so sorry, going back to what I was saying for next week. What I'll do next week, and then I'll let you go. I will send out one more brief kind of video where what I do in the video is I just bring in a few key quotations, a few tiny bits of kind of critical stuff that you could potentially use in the questions that I've set for the mock, okay, for the assessment. I'm not convinced that you are going to have proper full-on lessons again before summer. I think before summer, though, you will re-enter the college building and we will see each other face to face before the summer. And we will be able to kind of do some brief bits. I don't think it will be all of you at once. So I think it will be in smaller class sizes, just coming in so that you can actually kind of sit down and kind of talk to us. Play Star Wars Lego games. Nah. No, not League of Legends either. Yeah, as I say, I don't think school will happen until September, but I think you might come in groups of kind of 5 or so, just to come and kind of see us face to face and sort of talk through things prior to summer. Yeah, and no kind of no League of Legends, Rofi, no. Dark Souls, EverQuest, things like that. Anyway, people, that's me done for the day. As I say, I'll send you out something else next week. Not Club Penguin either. Brawl. Do the Tavern Brawl on Hearthstone. That's what you mean. I don't think it is, but there we go. Watch video has Ray from Star Wars in. Okay. Safe it, Stu. Safe people. Right. I will see you all soon. Okay. Ending the stream now. Toodaloo.